sacrifice in the face of prejudice.
This movement ain't nothing but trouble.
I'm not your enemy, I'm on your side.
A fight for freedom and equality.
What gives you the right to come down here and tell us how to live our lives?
Next Thursday at 10 on 4, Mississippi Murder.
Who decides which foreign stories make it to our news bulletins? Sheena MacDonald asks the questions in And Finally, next.
Is it true that when you are naked, you feel at your most vulnerable? Not necessarily. The 9000 from Saab. Pure driving pleasure.
Take a closer look at the American Express card. Because now, when you use the card, you can earn points by enrolling in the Membership Rewards program. Points which can turn into flights, hotel nights, dining, and fun. Maybe it's time you took a closer look at the American Express card. To apply for the card or to enroll in Membership Rewards, call us now on 0800 700 222.
One of the masterpieces of American cuisine is the Great American Chocolate Cookie. The main ingredient is chocolate chips. And heaps of them. Come on, come on. For that real American taste, McVitie's go all the way to Vermont. Oh, sorry, there are large milk chocolate chunks in every cookie too.
You mean?
Yes, from Vermont. Then McVitie's mix extra slowly. And so, the Great American Chocolate Cookie from McVitie's Masterpieces range.
Who the hell is this guy?
Steven Seagal. On Deadly Ground. Buy it on video now.
And cue Jonathan.
Oh, I like the whip of the whapper. Whirl it around and really relish the creamy white interior. Oi!
Hi there, egg pickers. I ate them whole. Not half. I've started, so I'll finish.
2 furlongs to go, and it's Leicester on the outside of Cadbury. It's Creme Egg trying desperately to get on the inside, and it's going to be a photo finish.
Edwin, yours.
You can have a Royal Bank capped rate mortgage even if you're not thinking of moving house. Now, isn't that a good idea? From the Royal Bank of Scotland. Cap your mortgage rate now. Just call 0800 880 880.
The Kellogg Special K low-calorie breakfast. Get the taste, get the shape.
Hey, listen, Colgate Total keeps on protecting you, even after you finish brushing. Colgate Total's antibacterial protection helps fight against plaque and cavities while you're working, and even against tartar and gum problems while you're enjoying yourself. Colgate Total. Brushing that works between brushings.
Music? Who needs it? We got Goodfella's American-style pizza. The decentest, honestest I think there is. Right, Frankie? You want deep pan? Fine. With a light and crispy base? Dandy. You like pepperoni? Bada bing. You got juicy tomatoes. Tomatoes, herbs even. Right, kid? Go on, say cheese. Now, shoot, out of my restaurant. Goodfella's American-style pizza, now available in your area. From stores with ice compartments.
Undercover Britain is back with your own secretly filmed investigations, this time ranging from the taxi tout scam, a game of cat and mouse with the unsuspecting, to running bent, dangerous loads on our roads, and the drugs world of the syndicate. First in the series, enter the caravan nightmare.
There's no water and no power.
The abuses by site owners exposed.
Every new day meant a fresh struggle.
Undercover Britain returns Monday at 9:30 on 4.
Tonight at 12:50, part 2 of Noam Chomsky's searing attack on mass media, manufacturing consent. You're watching Channel 4. Now, Sheena MacDonald with the third and final debate on the nature of news. Looks at the selective approach to foreign coverage in And Finally.
Sound like shows like gun, those guns like you said, guns, there's backslide, left, right, look now, dangerous faces in dangerous places, see ladies scream, baby girl, spit, scream, black, white, red, yellow, hair, rebels, all fine, all cool, take a look, baby, boom, all right, all hype, all bust, to your special. Here's the news, man, truth, bang, these bang, get down, war torn, kid born, hardcore, soft porn, what's next, don't sex, generation TV station.
And finally, on the day when the future of one Frenchman responsible for his own predicament took precedence in the news over the fate of millions of individuals with no control over their circumstances, just whose news have you been watching today? In this third live examination of what British TV viewers are being offered in the name of news, we're looking at foreign news. If television is our principal source of information about the rest of the world, and according to all the polls it is, what role do news programmes play in providing that information? The criticisms are familiar. There's not enough of it or too much, depending on your point of view. One so-called story dominates the bulletins for a number of days and disappears. What's happened? Has some editor somewhere said, oh, bugger Bosnia, and sent the satellite dish off to Kabul or Kobe? Or is the judgment more systematic than that? And even when the reporters and their equipment are there, TV news gravitates towards catastrophe and conflict, presenting people as victims or freaks, and is always mediated through the eyes and words of home-based reporters. Fair comment? Well, let's find out. To argue the odds, Nicholas Hinton, director of the Save the Children Fund, Maggie O'Kane of the Guardian newspaper, formerly a TV journalist with RTE, Nick Fraser, editor of the BBC's Fine Cut documentary series, and Michael Jermy, associate editor at ITN. Their first task, to consider the case put by Paddy Coulter of the International Broadcasting Trust, an independent TV production company which specialises in making programmes about development, environmental and human rights issues, not just for current affairs output, but also drama, entertainment and documentary. Now, the constraints of space and time are well known, but those aren't your only complaints, are they, Paddy?
No, I'm very concerned about the patchiness of the coverage of the rest of the world. And I feel that the reporters, however professional and however able to deal with crazy deadlines, actually are working sometimes under quite impossible constraints, particularly the lack of time to do stuff in depth.
Do you actually respect the work that foreign correspondents, foreign reporters do?
Respect their professionalism, but I don't always respect the briefs which they're given and their ability to pick up local perspectives.
Okay, well, maybe we should be specific not so much about the reporters, but about today's stories. Let's, as usual, remind ourselves what today's news has offered us from the rest of the world. We've all seen some form of TV news today, I expect, and Paddy has made his selection.
The main problem with foreign news on British television is that the agenda is overwhelmingly war and disaster driven. Otherwise, some sort of British angle is needed. This gives us a very lopsided, unbalanced view of the world, and today's foreign coverage is a perfect illustration of this. The networks were pretty thin on international news today, and this is virtually all they told us of the entire rest of the world. Let's start in Japan with the ITN chief foreign correspondent Michael Nicholson, who's on the trail of the poison gas makers.
Nobody here. Nobody here. Except that is for one of the cult, who for some reason had been left behind. What we'd stumbled on was Alma's best-kept secret, the building of a sophisticated chemicals factory. Great warehouses full of drums of chemical, gas containers. Over here. And there's the man himself. We showed our pictures to an American chemical weapons expert.
They didn't want anyone to be able to figure out exactly what it was they were doing. And that's suspicious.
Here we have Michael Nicholson being an intrepid reporter on a story he's only covering for its disaster potential. As often happens, the only expert interview is with an American, although we got a glimpse of a mysterious Oriental. On Channel 4 News, we did have a substantial report from their diplomatic editor, Nick Gowing, who's in Turkey following the government clampdown on the Kurds.
The heavy weapons are still firing, the 35,000 Turkish troops still sweeping through the 25-mile wide belt of northern Iraq they entered on Monday. It is as determined an action as the Turkish Prime Minister promised. Turkish journalists have been allowed limited access by the military to give the impression that all is going according to plan, but precisely what is happening cannot be reported accurately.
Gentlemen, press is not allowed in here, please.
Into Ankara today, 500 miles from the military action, flew the European Union troika of French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé, the current EU presidency, Germany the last presidency, and Spain the future holder. The long-planned meeting was about Turkey's eventual accession to the EU, the agenda building on the new customs agreement signed here 2 weeks ago. The incursion into Iraq was item 8, diplomatically the last priority.
I've no quarrel about the length and seriousness of the original report, but again, why did it need the advent of conflict to attract TV's attention? Now to the other criteria for foreign news desks, the UK connection. All this week, the news crews have revisited South Africa for all peak time bulletins, but it took a royal visit to get them there.
Long live the Queen, long live Mandela.
And it was the president many had come to see, though he wasn't saying so.
How's the Queen's visit going, Mr. President? Well, very warm, you can see for yourself. This is all for the Queen, not for me.
The turbulent and bloody history of this particular township makes this one of the most significant visits of this entire royal visit of South Africa.
Once again, the Queen saw little of real township life. Instead, she was taken to a British-aided project that helps disabled people, many of whom were paralysed by police bullets in the Soweto uprising 20 years ago.
The people of Soweto are growing more used to having strangers in their midst. Western tourists regularly take bus rides to see Winnie Mandela's house. But to have the Queen here in the powerhouse of black resistance and change is perhaps the most significant moment of this tour.
But what the Queen wasn't shown is this, Baragwanath's casualty ward, one of the busiest in the world. Victims of Soweto's endemic criminal violence cram the corridors. But for young British doctor Tom Porotar, it's trauma training he'd never get in Britain.
Every week and every month it's the same, and every weekend it's the same old story. And it's sad.
Here again, we see that standard reporting device in Africa, the soundbite from the British doctor or aid worker. And finally, the ultimate UK connection story, the bizarre tale of a British man in a Filipino jail.
Whoever this man is, he's facing decades in a Philippines prison. He claims he's Nigel Gatwood, a London phone salesman, and has a passport to prove it. He rejects claims he's another man entirely, Lee Heatley, an escaped prisoner missing from Downview Jail in Surrey.
The sad thing is that's the only view of the Philippines you're likely to see on TV news for some time. Unless, of course, there's a disaster.
Paddy, thank you. There was, of course, a bit of foreign news on the BBC 9 o'clock tonight that wasn't about a disaster. The Bermuda story, which is about Bermuda deciding whether or not it wants to go on being Britain's oldest colony.
Yes, that might blow a hole in my case, but
is that foreign news or British news?
I think it's British news. It's a British governor, it's a British colony, and in fact, it stood out in an otherwise predominantly domestic news story.
Very
I think
domestic,
really only the South African royal visit.
And for the record, we should say that the Chechen stronghold of Argun outside Grozny has been overrun by the Russian army, and that did get 15 or 10 seconds in the 9 o'clock, but I don't know whether it signified anything.
Was
to
it
anyone.
comprehensible? I don't know.
Okay, well, that's Paddy's view. Nick Fraser, fair comment.
I guess so. I don't know whether Paddy is surprised by this or not. I'm not at all surprised. I'm talking as a consumer. I love foreign news. I detest the English intrusions on it. I think this is rather bizarre that we have to see the Queen when we go to a casualty ward. But I see why. That it seems to me something that it's the price you have to pay. For me, in Britain, foreign news has become like the last form of genuine pornography now that Channel 4 has got seriously into the business. It's the sort of ultimate other. It's the ultimate way you get out of this society. You look at different things. I think actually, if you take newspapers and documentaries and radio into account, we are unbelievably well served in terms of foreign news.
But to what effect?
Oh, that's a different
I mean, if you
question.
say it's like pornography, is it a kind of elitist entertainment?
I think all television is a form of entertainment. I think that foreign news is a more elitist form of entertainment than other types of television. The real question is, does it do anything for us at all? I don't know the answer to that. I hope we'll get on to discussing it.
Do you want to look at some of the detail then, possibly? Now, you seem to suggest, Paddy, that Mike Nicholson's coverage was, what, cliched, racist? What were you saying?
Well, it's tending towards the reporter as hero format. A little bit of the Ruby wax. We see him directing the camera into various things. I don't think, I'm open to correction, maybe Mike, I don't think the Japanese spoke in that entire bulletin. It was run, you know, at some length.
Wasn't that a piece of investigative journalism? And Mike Nicholson and his crew seem to have found something that no other bulletin had found, the source of where some mysterious, possibly, substance was coming from. That.
Yes, we contrasted it though with the BBC News clip, which we didn't show. But you actually, you did have a view of the Japanese perspective on it. There was a funeral or a ceremony marking the death of the Japanese, and you had that. I thought that Mike's piece really did have all the hallmarks of Anglo-centricity about it. You followed the British reporter on the trail, and then, ultimate indignity, you get the American to stand the story up. What you gather of Japan, I don't really know. And this is really, this is the worry I have with Nick's point, that people are coming to this with very little context about the rest of that society. And are they getting a picture of Asia, really, which is really distorted and very serious, given the fact that it is either our main economic rival or our partner and economic partner and ally.
Before I ask Mike Jeremy to defend his veteran reporter, and would you say that typifies ITN House style?
I wouldn't go that far.
Right, Mike Jeremy, defend your man.
I think it was an enterprising piece of investigative reporting. The American we spoke to wasn't just any American, but the world's leading expert on chemical weapons. And I think your comments about the coverage of South Africa were highly selective. Sure, we interviewed one British doctor, but we interviewed 2 local residents of Soweto. We had our Africa correspondent covering the story today. Sky and the BBC had their royal correspondents, and I think our Africa correspondent, who's based in the region, gave a Sowetan perspective to the day's visit.
But had the Queen not been there?
Had the Queen not been there?
There hasn't been a lot of South African coverage since the election.
Since the elections, there have been 70 reports from South Africa on ITN, so I think it's not true that we only cover South Africa when there's a British angle.
Now, of course, talking to aid workers isn't going to be something you're going to complain about, Nicholas Hinton, is it?
Well, certainly. I mean, we're forever saying that we never get enough coverage, and I agree with Paddy in that respect. I don't agree with his criticism that somehow they're all about disasters. In the first place, I don't think they are. We didn't see a disaster in a conventional sense today, and certainly the ITN coverage, which was pretty bizarre, I thought, was certainly not about the disaster aspect of that particular tragedy. I'm forever pleading with the media in every shape or form to pay much, much more attention to disaster relief. When it does it successfully, I think the media does us a great credit, but it rarely does it at all, and frequently doesn't do it very successfully.
Well, we'll come on to what wasn't there, but wouldn't you call Turkey's, whatever you want to call it, I mean, the Prime Minister on Channel 4 News tonight said it was not an incursion, but there are Turkish troops on Iraqi territory in pursuit of PKK terrorists, they say. Wouldn't you call that conflict?
It is conflict.
We didn't see pictures, I know.
I think that I'd pick up another criticism that's already been made there, that it must be pretty hard for the average viewer, I think, to understand the context of that story at all. Use of initials. Surely we thought that actually Iraq, Iran, or wherever was actually about something quite different. What's Turkey doing here? And it's really quite difficult, I think, for many people to understand where we're coming out at all.
Why didn't you do Turkey on ITN, Mike?
Well, again, the coverage was selective of what we did tonight.
But you didn't...
No, Turkey was run as a shortish, but it was run on News at 10 tonight.
On 10, was it? I must have blinked.
I believe
you.
It was run on News at 10. It had extensive coverage on ITN's Channel 4 News, and on ITN's News for Super Channel in Europe, it was the lead story.
But given Nicholas's point, is it worth having cursory coverage of Turkey, given that even a long form or a longer form report is hard to understand?
I don't think that over the range of programmes we've made this week, we've given it cursory coverage. I think we've given it quite extensive coverage, including background, including a long interview with the Turkish Prime Minister earlier this week.
And well, that was on Channel 4 News.
Indeed,
yes. I mean, looking at the reason for the EU foreign ministers being in Ankara today, had there not been the conflict on the border with the PKK, do you think you would have covered it in the same way?
Probably not on this occasion, but news is partly about conflict. It's a legitimate part of news. I'm not saying it should be the only thing that the news covers, but certainly new events, things that have happened today that haven't happened yesterday, are in lots of ways the essence of news.
News is about conflict, except of course Maggie O'Kane when it isn't. Now I don't particularly want to tag you with Bosnia, but you have spent a lot of your life there over the last few years, although more recently you've been in Haiti and you've been reporting for The Guardian there and also doing some television reporting. Is there no conflict now in Bosnia?
There is conflict in Bosnia and there's about to be more, but I think the problem is that there is a sense of fatigue. People are tired of the story and the TV have pulled out. I think it was quite noticeable actually, I would say, in the coverage of Bosnia. The BBC were excellent. They were there. They made a serious commitment to being there. And I don't really want to be having a go at ITN again, but I mean, I think ITN wasn't there in the same consistent way, didn't cover it week in, week out the way it was done by the BBC, and I think that was quite noticeable in the coverage. But it is going on. The problem is that the people have become tired of it, and I don't know how you regenerate the interest.
Now, I should say that Martin Bell is back in central Bosnia now, and he had a report in the 9 o'clock news last night. But after the hours of coverage that have been given to that, do you think people do understand what's happening there? When you talk to people, I mean, are they fatigued, or do they say, I don't know what's happening?
I think a lot of people say, I don't know what's happening.
After all the effort that's been made.
That's a failure on our part, in a way.
Well, I've been deeply depressed by because I think the coverage of the Bosnian War has been, on the whole, the best coverage of any war I can recall. The Gulf War was the pits. But it seems to me, if you wanted to, you could understand something about Bosnia from watching the news night after night and all the documentaries. And I felt this when I was part of